This nameplate has been around since the 1950s, and it's about to get one of its biggest updates yet. I'm, of course, talking about the iconic Nissan Patrol, the all-important Y63 version that's set to give Nissan a big boost when it eventually arrives in Australia. I am CarsGuide Managing Editor Tim Nicholson, and I'm thrilled to be here on the newscast today with Deputy News Editor of CarsGuide, John Law. John, welcome to the newscast.
Thank you. It's my first time here, and I'm very excited to be talking about a new-gen Nissan Patrol.
Excellent. And of course, returning for another round in the newscast arena is Andrew Chesterton. Chesto, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I think this is podcast number 792 for me. However, I'm just as excited as I was the first time around.
Look at you go. Thank goodness for that. Look, we've got a lot to get through, and we want to give everyone the lowdown on what we know so far about this all-important Y63 model. So we'll get down to it. But first, I just want to ask John, when was the last time you drove a Patrol?
Well, I'm in a fairly privileged position in that it was just last week. We had a little event where we got to sample a selection of Patrols, including the new updated multimedia touchscreen in the TI and the TIL, sort of aftermarket looking unit, and also the Warrior. And the Patrol's a funny vehicle because I think when I was a bit more junior in this industry, I didn't understand the car, and I didn't like it very much, to be quite honest. And then as I've matured and understood what it's good at, and V8s have started to disappear a bit more, I've actually kind of come around to quite liking it, especially in Warrior trim with that V8 uncorked and the bimodal exhaust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? Chesto, were you a fan of this sort of car, or is it not really your vibe?
No, I'm a fan, mate. I just spent, in April this year, I drove one across WA, a Warrior variant, did a whole bunch of kilometres in it, heaps, like virtually lived in the thing, and had driven the non-Warrior version plenty of times too, although I must admit I'm yet to drive the latest update, which is the new screen which unlocks Apple CarPlay for the first time. And a bit like John, I think initially, because I live in the inner city of Sydney, I just, it doesn't really suit my lifestyle perfectly. But I think, interestingly, I think if the pharmaceutical companies who actually made and sold the vaccine did the best out of COVID, the second best would be the Nissan Patrol, because its sales were almost nowhere in the lead up to that. And then when suddenly we had this whole brigade of people who wanted to cross the country, and the Patrol fits that bill perfectly, and sales haven't slowed down since.
It's interesting, isn't it? Looking at the current sales figures of the Patrol, I think it's doing its best numbers it's ever done, or certainly this current generation has, which is crazy. And I think it's still selling maybe half of what the LandCruiser is, but it's pretty wild, John, that a model that is this old is selling these kind of numbers at this point in its timeline.
Yeah, totally. I'd written down the numbers here in my notes, and yeah, so the highest sales month ever for the Patrol nameplate in Australia was August 2023. Which surpassed March 2022. So, globally launched in 2010, on sale in Australia since 2013. So a car to still be setting its own records that late. As Chesto alluded to, I think some of that's the demand that LandCruiser supply couldn't quite cater to, but still there's plenty of loyal Patrol owners out there. You only have to look in comment sections of YouTube videos and news stories to see that.
I think it's very fortunate too that it plays in a category where age is actually a benefit. So like if you think of the LC200, if you think of the Patrol, even to a lesser extent, if you think of models like Hilux, people want cars that are sort of tried and tested. And so if you're going to be crossing the country, the fact that it's 10 years old and has been doing it for a decade is actually a benefit rather than a negative. The only downside to that is, of course, it had all the technology in it of a Casio watch, but now they've started to kind of update that stuff as well, gives it a slightly new lease on life too.
It does. It's weird though, because I think it's people, as you say, Chesto, don't care. Like my mother-in-law has one of these, and she doesn't care that it doesn't have all of the latest bits and bobs. It's just something that people are not fussed about. Whereas somebody who's buying like, I don't know, RAV4 or something, they want everything to be the latest tech.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think reliability trumps everything else in this category.
Yeah. Well, the big question is, where is the new one, Chesto?
I mean, what a question. My God, where is it? We have been talking about this eons and eons. And I feel like really the time when this thing was booming, I know they were trying to make hay when the sun shine with the vehicle that didn't owe them anything in terms of R&D. It was probably pretty much all profit by that point. But I would have thought that at some point over the last 2 or 3 years, they would have pulled out all the stops to deliver a new one, especially when you consider Toyota, who move like a turtle on new models, as you know, like their models stretch longer than anyone else's, have released an updated LC70, an all-new LC300. There's an all-new Prado around the corner. There's a Lexus GX. And in fact, they'll probably have a new Hilux by the time we have a new Patrol. So it does beg the question, what the hell is going on? Where is this thing?
It's true. You would also say some other rivals could be those other kind of cheaper ute-based SUVs like Everest and that kind of thing. They've now, like, you look at those sales and they've really eaten into, well, whether they've eaten into Patrol sales or whether they've just, that segment has grown, it's probably the latter. So you can't really afford to kind of stuff around and wait. And it seems like Nissan kind of has a bit.
It's a really interesting competitive set for this car, isn't it? Because you can do everything from really a diesel dual cab ute, a high-spec diesel dual cab ute, to a ute-based SUV, to a Prado or a Lexus GX or an LC300 or a Patrol. Basically anything that can tow and travel long distances finds itself in this vehicle's crosshairs. So, and my God, there's been a lot of new ones of those over the last couple of years.
Yep.
Very true. And John, in terms of what this thing is going to look like, I think we've got a bit of an idea of what it might look like from something we've already seen.
Yes, I think it's no secret that the Infiniti QX80, the 2025, which is due to be released imminently in the US, I think it's summer US, so winter in Australia time, which is about now, that gives a pretty good hint into what we're going to see, which is kind of a variation on the theme of Patrol. Like the Y62 to Y63 probably isn't going to be a huge visual jump like the Y61 was to Y62, but it's going to have things like probably a massive grille, some really nice sharp LED lighting features. I don't know, if you look at the QX80, it's got hidden sort of retractable door handles. It's a very, very clean design. And I don't know about you, Chesto, but I think the QX80 looks really good. And I think that's going to be an awesome basis for what a Patrol could look like.
Yeah, I think it's I think the modern, it's probably the best looking Infiniti, the QX80, possibly that they've ever done. So if it draws in from that, I think we're in a good place. I'd also point out quickly that, look, we don't know when it's coming, but we do know a whole bunch about it. Like the company has been speaking about it now for a number of years. And late last year in October, I was in Japan for the Tokyo Mobility Show and spent a whole bunch of time with the Nissan execs. So, for example, we know that they have ruled out the V8. It's gone. Twin turbo V6 is in. That's on the record. We know that they're going to lean into things like technology, luxury, but also its status as king of the desert. So luxurious, technology filled, and just as capable as the model it is today. And we know that quite bravely, they've not just said it's going to be better than, but much better than a Toyota LandCruiser 300 series, which, to be honest, is a fairly big step to climb. Much better than that. We'll have to wait and see, but they're making some bold promises.
Where do you think they're like aiming this car at as well? Like obviously, Australia is a pretty small market when you look at the global market. So what other markets are kind of going to be the focus for Nissan in getting this to be, as successful as the Y62?
It's the Middle East. This car is driven by the Middle East. That's why you can see behind me. Oh, they've also confirmed there'll be a Nismo version of the new one as well. But as you can see behind me, this is the Patrol Nismo, which we didn't get in Australia, but was basically a special edition for the Middle East. Their off-roading isn't quite as kind of rugged and rocky as ours. As a result, you can have a kind of lower, more street-focused Patrol that can still tackle the sandy stuff. But there's no secret that that's the big market. I mean, there's only so many markets around the world where a big petrol-chewing V8 is the engine of choice, and one of them is the Middle East.
Yep. There's also... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say there's also some demand in the US as well, not worth ruling out too. But yeah, as Chesto says, Middle East is absolutely where this thing's going to dominate.
I was just going to say, so in the past, it was kind of, we'll take what the Middle East gets. That was the rule for Patrol, really. But the popularity of the car in this market has made Nissan in Australia say they actually have a much bigger seat at the negotiating table now. So you can expect the next gen Patrol to be a little bit more Australian flavored than the models that have gone before. And as based purely on its popularity and demand in this market. So what exactly that means, we don't know yet, but you can expect it to be tested here, possibly tuned here. And yeah, delivered with a bit more of an Australian focus.
You mentioned before, Chester, of course, the potential powertrain, or the powertrain that's likely to be powering this thing. So I remember back when this current generation came out, there was such an outcry because there was no availability for diesel. So they sold the previous one alongside the current one for a very long time. And, you know, initially the sales were pretty low of this generation. And then obviously it's just kind of ramped up and up and up as it's gone through its life cycle. And people seem to care less now about having a diesel engine in one of these things. So I guess the purists who love a V8, John, you were saying before, do you think that they're going to be okay with, you know, going down to a V6?
Well, I do wonder if Nissan might do again what they did with Y61 and Y62 and actually kind of hold on to a little bit of Y62 for maybe a year, but it seems deeply unlikely. Given how new models work, and that old vehicle was satiating more, agricultural demand. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what the punters say. There was definitely a lot of noise around LC300 going down to LC200, to a 6 from an 8. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots of whinging, but I think give it a year and people will get over it because it's got way more power and torque.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are broken when it comes to this sort of stuff. It's insane to me that you would like lament the death of a V8 when the new engine makes more power and uses less fuel. So you want to spend more money for less power. That's the argument. I don't understand it. And it was the same with the LC300. And in fact, Nissan executives are on the record as saying, drive this thing and I promise you, you will not miss the V8. And they're 100% right. It's an old technology that is due for replacement. And frankly, you know, in 2024 and beyond, you can expect V8s just to vanish. You can whinge about it all you want, but they're just not going to be here.
Very true. Is there any talk?
I say, okay, but they're putting a more powerful engine in it. Let's move on.
Yeah, where's the bad? Is there any talk, Chester, of hybridization, electrification, and that kind of thing for next gen Patrol?
Nothing that I've heard yet, and certainly no rumors of it. I think eventually Nissan has made noises about moving the Patrol onto a solid-state battery platform. I think that's the technology that they're waiting on. Although, to be honest, solid-state batteries are a bit like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory at this point. They sound absolutely majestic, but no one knows exactly what they'll do or when they'll arrive or how much they'll cost. So you can put that one on the back burner for a little while. This model, though, they're basically, Nissan says that their large vehicles don't really lend themselves to an e-power solution. They would possibly lend themselves to a plug-in hybrid solution, but Nissan hasn't committed to following Mitsubishi down that path. So no, I think you'd expect this one to be twin turbo petrol V6 only.
On that, just really quickly, speaking of the Mitsubishi of it all, given they're in an alliance, there are rumors that this vehicle will also spawn the return of the Mitsubishi Pajero, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Will that happen? We'll have to wait to see.
Mitsubishi's very keen to do a Pajero, if you ask them. But as you say, whether that's ever going to happen.
Look, Mitsubishi in Australia is on the record as saying how much they love one. They love that nameplate here and they're campaigning for it. They have got something to reveal, I think, either later this year or early next. We don't know that is going to be that vehicle yet at this point. But given how much it costs to develop a car, it would seemingly make sense to develop a new large SUV for your sibling at the same time you're developing yours. Much like, you know, for example, when the Toyota was doing the new Prado, it's not as if Lexus said, oh, okay, well, we'll go and do our own. They just took that platform and made it Lexus because it makes sense, right? So again, it is a theory that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And John, on that, do we know if the next Patrol is going to have the same kind of level of off-road ability? Is it still going to be ladder frame chassis, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think we're pretty clear it's going to have a ladder frame chassis. It's a development. I think for the Infiniti, the claim is about 57% more rigid for the chassis. And I think we can just expect developments on the technology because the recipe's kind of there for off-road capability for the Patrol. You need a certain amount of ground clearance, a certain amount of height, a certain amount of articulation, and then I think it'll be a lot of finessing of what the Y62 has, rather than a whole new take on the vehicle.
Yeah, so I'm going to quote a Nissan executive here to answer that. And that's their global vice president of product and strategy, a guy called Ivan Espinosa, who gave us a little bit of this when we were in Japan. But his argument is not to change the formula. What he wants to do is just notch everything up a level. So it will be super capable. The towing won't change, but it'll be notched up on technology, notched up on luxury, and notched up on design. So it'll just be the theory anyways, it'll just be an improved version of the car we have today. Vastly improved, they would argue.
Yeah. With that, coming back to the Nismo of it all, Chesto, do we know anything about that? Is that just going to be a tweaked version of that engine, or will it be just the same engine but with more capability?
Look, Nismo, the whole Nismo philosophy when it comes to a vehicle like the Patrol is more on-road than off. And look, you could argue what's really interesting about the Patrol Warrior is that it kind of blends both those worlds. Like you've got the bimodal exhaust that you can open the taps on road, but doesn't detract from the off-road capability. Nismo is going to try and capture that same thing, I imagine, but they always sit a little bit lower on bigger, shinier alloys, and those are kind of things that don't always lend themselves to off-road capability. But so yeah, generally speaking, Nismo is more of a road focus. We know they're doing one. Exactly what it'll look like, we'll have to wait and see, I'm afraid.
I might jump in with just, sorry.
Yeah, please, Warrior.
With just Warrior, because it's not always you get a chance to drive the base car back to back with what Premcar has done, but experiencing a Warrior directly after a TIL, the difference in suspension, both on and off road, like the control, the confidence you feel, is huge. So I think Nissan would be silly not to use a fair bit of Premcar's know-how and development of the previous gen Patrol to either make a Nismo or keep that Warrior nameplate alive in Australia. And I'll quote Bernie Quinn, who's the Premcar boss, who said he not only hopes so, but he expects so, as to being asked to work on a Warrior project for the next gen car. So yeah,
that would make the most sense to me, John. You bring in a base, for want of a better term, Nissan for everybody. You bring in a Nismo for those who want something that looks good and goes fast on the road, and you let Bernie go to town on the sort of off-road focused Warrior version, and then you've got a really nice family. Look, you probably know more about this than I do as John now, but I think I think if I'm not mistaken, there's no componentry change for the suspension between the Nissan Patrol and the Patrol Warrior. I think the Premcar guys just tuned Nissan's onboard hydraulic suspension system, right?
There is a physical change to the springs, which are triple weight springs. Okay. But I think they use the same dampers, and they have their own machined component for the HBMC. But it's the same systems. It's just different springs. I think it's different in the rear, which apparently really helps steering feel, which I was surprised by. But anyway, I'm going off topic.
It's amazing what they managed to achieve by doing. Anyway, sorry, I'm off topic myself, but they've done a good job with it. That thing drives really well.
Yeah, it's hard not to oversell how good that transformation is. So yeah.
Now, big question, of course, is how much this thing is going to cost. I think the current one starts at about high 80s, 88-ish, and then goes up to a tick over 100, correct me if I'm wrong, John, for the Warrior. So I guess, Chesto, what do you think is going to happen here? Are we going to look at a similar kind of price? Or no?
I'd be surprised. I don't think... look, over the last 10 years, I would say, I don't remember a car coming in cheaper than the car it replaces. It's very rare, and I don't think this is going to be any different. You remember, this car's been around for a long time. It owes the brand nothing in terms of development. All of that money has been paid back. It's an old engine, an old tech. The new one is a completely different proposition, and I just can't see it coming in cheaper.
And I think, John, if you look at the pricing of the LandCruiser 300 series, that goes up to nearly 150 grand for the GRS drive. Do you think Nissan could go that far?
Look, maybe for a Nismo, maybe for a Warrior that had a bit of extra gas uncorked, and we don't know how good it's going to be. It may be able to justify that 150 grand price. But for me, I think Nissan will have to keep the start price for a TI under 100 grand to keep it competitive in the marketplace, because unless it really is going to be genuinely better than a 300 series, which it may well be, I think the Patrol in this current form has always offered that really nice value split between Prado and 300 series, where you get a nice juicy engine, but you're not paying crazy amounts of money. So yeah, I fingers crossed, 95 to 99 grand for a start price, I think would be a really cool place to see a base model. Oh, and
Nice.
Chesto, there is a recent price drop for a new model, and that is the Tesla Model 3.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Good point.
They've had about 100 to be fair.
Yes.
And John, just looking at this vehicle, the new generation Y63, is it going to be the same size as the current generation one, or is it going to go bigger, smaller, in between?
Well, look, I think we can only look back to our US market friends with the Infiniti QX80, which has actually grown quite significantly over the model it replaces. So it's up to about 5.35 meters long. And the Patrol here is about 5.1 meters long, 5.2. So it's quite a lot longer, though it does sit on a suspiciously similar wheelbase, which is just over 3 meters. So probably a little bit more overhang. And then, of course, it's going to be wider and taller to accommodate more space.
Nice. And that engine, just coming back to the engine as well, what sort of outputs are they looking at for the 3.5 litre V6 turbo?
Again, so as it is in the QX80, it is 336 kilowatts and 698 newton meters. So about 40 kilowatts up and 150 newton meters more. So that's a lot of extra grunt.
Stick that in your V8 pipe and smoke it. How is the what's the towing capacity on it? It's 3.5, isn't it? The QX80?
It's 8,500 pounds, as the Americans would say, which is 3.85 tons.
3.85 tons. Yeah, so
Yeah.
3.5. Interesting. There you go.
Nice. And there's a lot of people that are champing at the bit for this thing. Again, my mother-in-law is she was going to buy one of the updated ones with the Apple CarPlay, but she has decided to hold her wallet for next year. Is that when we're going to see this car? When's it going to go on sale, Chesto? Do you know anything about timing for us?
2025 would be. Look, global timing 2025. We're a pretty important part of the global market, so I'd expect to see it in the first or second quarter of next year.
Does that check out with you, John?
Yeah, I think the official reveal date's before the end of Japanese fiscal year, which is the end of March. And then as for on sale, as Chesto says, how long's a piece of string, but you wouldn't want to see it push right out to 2026 for Australia. It would seem a little too long.
My argument would be once you see this car, and I'm not trying to oversell it here, but once you see an all new version of a car with a newer engine, more power, less fuel use, more technology, that's got to have an impact on the current model sales, right? So I would suggest once they show it, they'll be bringing it in as quickly as possible.
Yeah, which is very different from the current generation one, which I think John mentioned globally was revealed in 2010, and we didn't get it for another 3 years after that. So I think those days are behind us. I think they now understand how important this model is for our market. So hopefully we'll see it sooner. Well, gents, we've come to the end of another newscast. Thank you very much for being here, John Law and Andrew Chesterton.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. As always, we're going to have heaps more information on the new generation Nissan Patrol at carsguide.com.au. So make sure you're checking the site. Feel free to comment and let us know your thoughts on this next generation Patrol. And thanks again for tuning in.